Welcome to episode 1 of Islands in the League presented by DraftKings. This will be our monthly video series where I deep dive on the history of the NBA. Lots of learning to be had. We'll also talk with resident sports betting expert Josh Applebaum to give you some idea of how to place some bets. Plus, we'll have some fun with NBA Twitter. Episode 1, let's get it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Jason is the best.
Why not me?
Action. Fans from all over the world will convene in Salt Lake City, Utah on February 19th to watch 24 of the best basketball players in the world compete in this year's NBA All-Star Game. The votes are in. Starters have been announced. Captains have been chosen. And reserves for each conference will be named on Thursday, February 2nd. Inevitably, some player having an all-star caliber season will be snubbed. Anger will ensue. Players will be upset. There may even be tears.
Sorry.
Fans on Twitter will argue the merits of why their favorite player should be in the game and why your favorite player shouldn't. It happens every year. But my question is, why are there only 12 roster spots for each conference? It literally doesn't make sense when you examine some important historical details. The first All-Star game was played in the Boston Garden on March 2nd, 1951. Boston Celtics great Ed Macauley earned MVP honors after posting a game-high 20 points. That game in the Garden featured some of my personal favorite players from that era. Guys like George Mikan, thanks for the drill, guy, Dolph Schayes, and of course, Bob Cousy. To start the 1951 NBA season, there were 11 teams and 110 total NBA roster spots. 20 players were named All-Stars in 1951, meaning 18.2% of all players made the All-Star game. The Washington Capitals actually folded 35 games into the season, so by the time the All-Star game rolled around, roughly 20% of the league made the All-Star game. 10 years later, in 1961, the NBA was down to 8 teams, 88 roster spots, 22 All-Stars. 25% of players made the All-Star game. Following the 1961 season, the league started to expand, beginning with the Chicago Packers, now the Washington Wizards. The Chicago Bulls were added in 1966. The following year, the San Diego Rockets, now the Houston Rockets, and the Seattle Supersonics, now the Oklahoma City Thunder, had their inaugural season. The year after that, the NBA added the Phoenix Suns and Milwaukee Bucks. By the time 1971 rolled around, with the inclusion of the Buffalo Braves, now the LA Clippers, the Portland Trailblazers, and the Cleveland Cavaliers, there were 17 teams and 190 roster spots. This is where it gets a little interesting. Following league expansion, the league also expanded the All-Star teams. In 1971, 72, and 73, the NBA increased the All-Star roster size to 14 players per conference. So for these 3 seasons, 14.7% of players made the All-Star game. The number of teams in the NBA continued to increase over the next 10 years. The New Orleans Jazz, now the Utah Jazz, were added in 1974. The ABA merger in 1976 brought in the Denver Nuggets, Indiana Pacers, San Antonio Spurs, and New York Nets, now the Brooklyn Nets. The Dallas Mavericks expansion team started playing in 1980. So, in 1981, there were 23 teams, 253 roster spots, and 24 All-Stars. That's 8.7% of players. Are you noticing a trend? Further expansion in the 1980s saw 4 more teams added to the league. The Miami Heat and Charlotte Hornets, now the New Orleans Pelicans, in 1988, the Minnesota Timberwolves and Orlando Magic in 1989. By the way, beginning in the 88-89 season, the NBA added a 3rd team for all NBA honors. Now, why would they do this? Because there were more teams and more players. By 1991, there were 27 teams, 324 roster spots, still 24 All-Stars. Just 7.4% of players made the All-Star game. Seems like it's getting harder and harder to be an All-Star. After the Toronto Raptors and Vancouver Grizzlies, now the Memphis Grizzlies, joined in 1995, there were 29 teams, 348 roster spots, 24 All-Stars. Now just 6% of players made the All-Star game. To make up for George Shinn moving the Hornets to New Orleans, the league gave the city of Charlotte an expansion team in 2004. Enter the Bobcats, now the Charlotte Hornets. In the subsequent years after getting to 30 teams, league rosters went from 15 to 17 with the introduction of two-way contracts. So now there are 30 teams, 510 roster spots, still 24 All-Stars, and just 4% of players make the All-Star game. It's harder than ever to be an All-Star, which is why I think we need to increase the number of players who get this prestigious honor. Now, I don't know the right number. Maybe it's 13, maybe it's 14, but let's just say we had 15 All-Stars per conference. Even then, only 5.8% of players would make the All-Star game, which is about the same percentage of players as in 2011 when there were 30 teams, 450 roster spots, and 24 All-Stars. Also, why are we still doing conferences? We pick captains. They choose the teams. We don't play the game as conferences. Can we just select the 30 best players? My prediction, someone very deserving of being an All-Star will get snubbed this year from the Eastern Conference. If we increase the total All-Star roster size to 30, I would then argue you wouldn't need to name alternates. Due to injuries, it seems there are multiple alternates named every season. In fact, the last time no All-Star alternates were named was 2005. Now, you may be asking, why is this important? Because it's the NBA and legacy matters. When we think of great players from any era, how many All-Star appearances they have on their resume is one of the determining factors in how they are viewed in the history books. An All-Star appearance is meaningful to the player. It's a point of validation. It creates value in their playing career and value for their brand, and it matters when discussing their historical legacy. An All-Star appearance isn't just meaningful to the player. It matters to an organization, a fan base, a city. It matters to the history of the game. And yet, it's harder than ever for players to be named an All-Star. Let's go back to that first All-Star game in 1951. Here's a few Hall of Famers that played in that game. The man with the long gray beard, Jim Pollard. Pollard made 4 All-Star appearances in 7 NBA seasons. He never shot over 40% for his career, and his career high average for points was 15.5. Andy Phillip, or Handy Andy, was a great point guard and made 5 All-Star appearances in his career, but only shot over 40% once. New York Knicks legend Dick McGuire made 7 All-Stars. He shot 38% for his career, never averaged double digits in points, and his career high average for assists was 7.6. Different times, different game. I get it. I'm not saying these guys shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. They absolutely should. Relative to the rest of the league, they were stars. League average field goal percentage didn't exceed 40% until 1960. And as I always say, we should celebrate and acknowledge what players are able to accomplish in their era. Why am I even talking about Dick McGuire or Handy Andy or the man with the long gray beard, Jim Pollard? Because they were all-stars. And there's a chance that a player this season averaging 22 points, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, shooting 50% from 2 and 40% from 3 gets left off the All-Star roster. And that would be a real shame. All-Star appearances are one of the determining factors for Hall of Fame induction. And I strongly believe the NBA should expand the NBA All-Star roster size. We have expanded the league. We have expanded the talent pool. It's time for a few more guys every year to get that stamp of validation. 10 years later, in 1861, this year's MVP race is unlike anything we've ever seen. Scoring is way up. 40-point games are way up. It feels like any night an NBA player can make history. But this also means that Twitter is going crazy. Let's have a look. So, who's your MVP so far this year? I don't know. How about the best player on the best team? First in VORB, first in Raptor, first in basically every single advanced statistical category available. What was that? Steph better. First in offensive rating, first in points per 100 possessions, first in points per 75 possessions. We should not take LeBron James for granted. 34, 10, and 5, and he's doing it on the defensive end. What do you want? Without Doncic, the Mavs are a lottery team. Bottom feeders. They're basically dog shit. As good as he was last year, somehow he's taken another leap. I bet their own families hate them. I hate them. I hate myself. Whoa. Holy shit. I can't believe we're here right now. Did you see that dunk he almost made the other day? It was almost as good as the alley-oop he almost made. It's KD. Pure hoopers know what's up. What does that mean? He's doing more with less. Honestly, it's a lot like Jokic last year. 71 points? That's Kobe numbers. That's Wilt numbers. I guess I want to thank My parents? Oh, look who's wrong. Malpractice. First in QBR, first in Nielsen rating. Oh, yeah, that's an interesting point. Steph better. Plus, he's only 19. It's Russ's fault. It's Russ's fault I didn't get that job last week. It's Russ's fault my girlfriend dumped me. Bing bong. He is the process. He is Philly. Unless he has a bad game, and then he's fucking dead to me. The heart and the hustle and the grit and the grind. He's rated highest in customer satisfaction by J.D. Power and Associates. Ugh, did you see that Oreos and milk thing? Shut the fuck up and light the beam. He's 98% on Rotten Tomatoes. Oh man, I'm so sorry your grandma just died. Steph better. Why do you hate us? Why do you hate us? Get Lucas some help. Why do you hate us? 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 Is it because of Russ? Hold on, we gotta do some nicknames. We gotta do some nicknames research.
Why are we reading it?
Okay, ready? The Houdini of the hardwood, Bob Cousy. The Great Dane. The Great Dane, Vern Mickelson. The Kangaroo Kid, Jim Pollard. The man with the long gray. This is just too.
You're making that up.
I'm not. This is Basketball Reference. It's just too good. Hold on. The man with the long gray beard, Jim Pollard. Stop, Jason.
All right, I'm ready.
Come on, man. Oh, my God.
All right, let's welcome in sports betting expert Josh Applebaum, host of the VSiN Market Insights podcast and the author of The Everything Guide to Sports Betting. Josh, thank you so much for joining us on Islands in the League. If you are a casual NBA fan and you're not necessarily a sports bettor and you're getting into it, if you've never bet NBA before, what are some of the things that you look for to make a smart bet?
Yeah, JJ, it's great to be with you, and thanks so much for having me on the show. I think, when you're betting the NBA, I think there's a kind of a data-driven approach that you want to take. Like if you just go to a bar, on a weeknight here and the NBA game is on the screen, what you're going to see is probably the public bettors who really are betting based on gut instinct and bias. They're just betting based off their favoritism. So, Giannis is great. Let's bet the Bucks tonight. Tatum's great. Let's bet the Celtics. There isn't much of a kind of thought process behind it. So my specialty pretty much across all sports, but especially NBA, is to really lean on the data. I think that's the first step you want to take if you want to kind of advance from a, casual bettor to actually making some money and making sports betting profitable. So a couple things I look at, JJ, and we provide these percentages directly from DraftKings at VSiN, is looking at the percentage of bets and percentage of dollars. That's the most basic thing you can do to give yourself an edge or an advantage. So what I'm getting at here is, for every game, when we're looking at the spread, which the spread is the most popular way to bet the NBA, similar to football, right off the bat, where's the public? Where's the smart money at? So I'm a contrarian base bettor, JJ. I like to bet against the public. I like to bet against what everyone is saying is a lock or a guarantee. Let's look to go the other way. So right off the bat, if you see a team percentage of bets and they are getting less than half the ticket, so 20, 30, 40% of bets, I'm automatically attracted to them because that's a bet against the public play. More often than not, the public loses, and basically the house always wins in the end. So that's my starting point. Then I'll look at percentage of dollars. Like if you look at a team that's getting 30% bets, but 50, 60% of money, that's a good bet split telling you that the sharper wagers are in their favor. And then line movement is critical. You can't imagine how many people overlook line movement, but put your bias to the side. Don't bet based on what you think or want or hope will happen. Look at what the data in the market is doing, because the market is really efficient. You have a lot of really sharp bettors who are moving these numbers and have the respect of the sports book. So for example, if you're a favorite, and you open -1, now you're up to -1.5, -2. Right off the bat, that's telling you something, that respected money came in there on that favorite. So my kind of angle here, JJ, there's so much that goes into it. But if you want to take the first step to making a smart bet in the NBA, lean on the data. Look at a team getting a low percentage of bets, higher percentage of money, and a line move in their favor. To me, that's a good starting point if you want to start making good bets in the NBA.
I am admittedly a novice sports bettor. And I feel like you're admonishing me because I will admit I'm a gut feel whimsical bettor. I just get a feeling and then I place a bet. That's just kind of how I do it. Specifically with the NBA, what is different or unique about betting on the NBA versus other sports like the NFL, which is another heavily trafficked sports betting market?
So JJ, first off, you're not a casual bettor. I think your gut instinct is probably a lot more informed than a guy who didn't play in the NBA here. So I wouldn't admonish yourself too much here. I think your instincts are spot on. But I think the NBA, what makes it different, and one thing that's difficult in the NBA is injuries. Like NBA, and you know this, JJ, if you're betting the NBA, you have to be glued to Twitter pretty much all day. You're going to see a lot of players with load management. The other day the Celtics, sat like 5 different guys. So I think right off the bat, if you're betting NBA, again, along with this kind of data perspective, is you got to know who's in and who's out. And you can see huge line moves in the NBA based upon, players being in or out. Like, LeBron maybe isn't a great example anymore. Lakers aren't very good this year, but you would constantly see if LeBron's out, boom, maybe LeBron's team is -5. Now it's down to a pick'em. So you got to pay attention to the injuries. Also, I would look at heavily bet primetime games. Like JJ, when you're calling a primetime game and it's a heavily bet, 7 o'clock, 10 o'clock game, those are the plays I really like to go contrarian in, because not all NBA bets are pretty much equal in terms of ticket counts. Like you might get a game from maybe the Hornets and I don't know, another team that isn't that popular, let's say the Detroit Pistons. That's going to be a low ticket count game. The public isn't really attracted to those games. They're looking at the big games between the best teams and the star players. So right off the bat, when you get to these primetime games, look to go the other way. If a team's only getting 20% in a heavily bet primetime game, that's something that I'll definitely look toward. And then schedule spots too. This, JJ, teams on the second leg of a back-to-back versus teams that are rested. Those are really important things to look at. And then also when you're betting totals, I like to bet a lot of totals in the NBA. Pace is really important. If you look at some data here on how quick you get up and down the court, you look at college, like a team like, Gonzaga, they're fast up and down the court. They hit a lot of overs. Team like Virginia, slow up and down the court, hit more under. So you can kind of apply that to the NBA. But these are all different factors. I think unlike football, which is, once a week and you have all week leading up to it, NBA is really specific to the matchup, and it's a really quick turnaround with the data only being up there, sometimes only 24 hours in advance.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. The matchup specifically, I think that matters a lot in NBA. And glad you brought up pace too, because I would never bet on a game I was calling in the same way. I treat it the same way as a player. I'm not allowed to. I never would bet on a game I was playing in. But I had Memphis and Golden State last night. I have no idea what the over was on the total, but that was the number 1 team in pace and the number 3 team in pace. Game did not go into overtime, and it was 122-120. And that was after both teams could not make a shot in the first quarter. Golden State's turning the ball over, and it still ends up being a high-scoring game. The other point that you brought up, I think that's really important, is travel because of back-to-backs. And I would also add something. This is just a theory of mine. Location and birthdays. So social media, guys put up, they're going out depending on the city. Like, I'm not going to bring up the team, but this recently happened. They went on a losing streak because they were in some nice nightlife cities. And one of the guys had a birthday. It happens. Like that's part of it. And the other part that you brought up was the injuries and load management. I think with the NFL, right, the injury report is daily, every day in the entire week leading up to the game. Whereas in the NBA, you might find out, as this poor Miami Heat fan did last week with Jimmy Butler, you might find out at the arena that your favorite player is not playing. And that, of course, will affect a lot of things. Specific right now to the NBA in January, which teams are you seeing getting heavy betting action?
Yeah, so in terms of futures, I think, you can look at betting in the NBA a couple different ways, JJ. Like one is just the standard, tonight's game, am I taking the dog, the favorite, the over, or the under? You can also look at prop betting. That's huge in the NBA right now too. Like, will Doncic go over under, 45.5 points, rebounds, and assists? But also the futures market. I think this sometimes gets overlooked because, NBA bettors and just bettors in general, they want to place a bet today. They want to know whether or not they won. They want to ideally cash and get their money tonight. I think there's kind of a not a bias, but a reluctance to bet futures, which are, who's going to win the NBA title, who's going to win the East or the West. You can also look at futures like MVP and all these different awards. So I really love betting futures because it's something that you can kind of make an educated guess or an informed decision based on a lot of the data in the movement, and then kind of set it aside and monitor it throughout the year. You kind of have a rooting interest here. So the obvious teams here taking all the money, JJ, the Boston Celtics, they're plus 350 right now to win the NBA title. But when I look at futures, it's not just, hey, let's bet the best team that's going to win it all. It's also the value of the number. Like Celtics, they have the best record. They look great. You had Udoka leave, and, you had Gallinari get hurt. You had these issues. There are questions going into the year, but they're a powerhouse. They're playing great. They're the favorite to win it all. Will they win it all? We shall see. But at plus 350, you're not really getting a very good payout here. So to me, what I like to do when I bet futures, it's not just, hey, who do I think is going to win, but what's the value of the number right now? So JJ, I'll throw this at you. This is a former team of yours, the 76ers. I would love to get your take on them. They're plus 1,400 right now. They're not the favorite. They're kind of an undervalued team. But what I looking at futures too, and a little hint here, you might know this, ESPN Hollinger, JJ. He has this kind of analytics platform that he has that I reference every day. He's got the pace, the analytics, offensive, defensive efficiency. If you look at a lot of the NBA title winners, just go back, last 10 years or more, they're mostly going to be top 5 in both offense and defensive efficiency. And you obviously the Celtics, they're top 10 in both. The Nets, they're interesting, plus 600, they're top 10 as well. But what I want to get your take on the Sixers is that plus 1,400 feels like a pretty good number. And they're actually number 6 offensive efficiency, and they're number 4 defensive efficiency. So, will the Sixers win the title this year? Based on the odds, probably not. But from a value standpoint, getting plus 1,400 with a good team in both of those top 2 categories, that's something that I'd look for. So what do you think, JJ? Can the Sixers with Doc and their big 3, can they make a move here? Is plus 1,400 something that would intrigue you?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought the Sixers up. They're 19-4 as of this recording. They're 19-4 in their last 23 games. They're trending in the right direction defensively, offensively. And I want to emphasize a point you just made, because it's a point that I've made a couple times over the last month. Since 2000, every single NBA champion has been at least top 5 in either defensive efficiency or offensive efficiency. There's 2 exceptions to that, the 2006 Miami Heat and the Dallas Mavericks in 2011. But both those teams were top 10 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. So when you're talking about looking at who potentially could win, that's an important metric to me. The other important metric, and this relates back to the 76ers, there are 5 active players that have been the best player on the best team. I think there's a good chance this year we add a 6th person. Maybe that's Tatum, maybe that's Embiid. So you need a true difference maker. The 76ers have that. So they've got the efficiency on both ends of the floor. They have the difference maker in Joel Embiid. And the really intriguing thing about this season in particular, and I think even going back to last season, there are multiple, there's more than 5 top 5 players to me. You need a top 5 player to win it all. But to me, it feels like you could make an argument that there's 9 or 10 top 5 players. And so then you start looking at, all right, is there a true Robin to the Batman? And the 76ers, again, they have that with James Harden. They have a great supporting cast. They have defense. The non-Joel Embiid minutes, that has always been an issue in the playoffs. That has swung series. It swung my series in 2019 against the Raptors. And so that still is a little bit of a concern, especially on the defensive end. Even last year, first year I could place bets. I actually really enjoy doing futures. I don't need the immediate payout. And the 2 teams that I bet on last year were the Miami Heat and the Phoenix Suns. And the reason was because both those teams, I view Jimmy Butler as a difference maker. He proved that in 2020 in the bubble. I think Devin Booker is that guy as well. And both those teams all season were either top 5 in both or top 10 in both defensive and offensive efficiency. The other thing I really like to do is same game parlays. How would you recommend going about building same game parlays?
Yeah, so I think same game parlays, they're really popular. They're kind of a way to, apply multiple bets into one bet. If you cash them all like a standard parlay, you're going to have a really good payout here. So this is a very attractive bet from the betting public. If I want to put $5 on a game, I want to, have the potential of winning $100 or even more here. So I think same game parlays, obviously it has to be on the same game. That's why it's harder to win same game parlays versus regular parlays, which, same game, you're tied to obviously that one game, where if you make a regular parlay, you can incorporate different games and kind of pick your spots here. So they are harder to win, but I think you go into them kind of with a thought process and a theory. Like, you don't don't just want to say, hey, like the Mavs are great, let me bet the Mavs. And I keep going back to this example because Doncic has been, one of the best players in terms of cashing all of his props and going over here. But you want to kind of have a theory of how the game is going to play out. So for example, like one way to bet a same game parlay is start off with who's going to win the game. You can apply not just the spread into your example here or how you're going to build it, but also kind of take it down and get yourself a better number. Like let's say that that 76ers example, maybe the Sixers are a 10-point favorite in the game. Well, you could start your same game parlay by saying, instead of winning by 10 or more or 11 or more and covering, let's start with our first leg just to win the game right off the bat. You don't have to sweat the margin of victory. We'll start off with, hey, win the game, likely to happen. You're favored by 10. Then I would isolate maybe a total, like if you like a specific example of, this team to win and also the line to go over. A couple examples here, JJ, teams that have been great to the over, like the Spurs. They're 29-18 to the over as of right now, 62%. So maybe you like the Spurs to lose the game, but score a lot, give up a lot, hit the over. So boom, we've now got two legs: a team to win, the total to go over. And then, on the Embiid example, what if, and I don't know if this is true about the Spurs in particular, but Embiid feasts on the boards, and you're going up against a team that gives up the most offensive rebounds to the opposing team. They're kind of smaller. They're getting really manhandled down low. Boom. Then you could look at Embiid going over his rebounds or, going over his points. So to me, same game parlays, a lot of times you're going to see the books, DraftKings, they'll post ones that they've created. But remember, you can create your own. And I think that's kind of the fun of it. Not just playing something that's in front of you, but thinking through the game, how you expect it to play out. What edge do you have over the book? So applying, the who's going to win, whether or not the total goes over under, and then isolate a specific player that you feel has an advantage over their opponent. That's, to me, kind of a smart way to approach a same game parlay.
It's the same idea that you started with, and that's using the data. The Spurs example is a great example. In thinking they've been 29th or 30th in defense all season. And in thinking they're going to give up a lot of points. And a lot of times as a player, when you are playing in a game where it's very easy to score, you can get lax with your defense. That's just human nature. And so all of a sudden, a team like the Spurs that does struggle at times offensively, they're out in transition, they're getting easy buckets, and all of a sudden you've got a high-scoring basketball game. I want to go back real quick to the futures conversation and just give you a few teams for me that I'm particularly intrigued by as value plays. I think the Cleveland Cavaliers are plus 2,200 right now. I think they're one ancillary piece away from being a real contender. They've got to shore up that small forward position, closing lineup. Karis LeVert, great on the ball on offense, not great off the ball. I think he doesn't necessarily fully complement Mitchell and Garland. The Mavericks at plus 3,000 right now. Maybe they swing. Maybe there's a big piece, not an ancillary piece, but a big piece, and they get Luka Doncic a true Robin. And all of a sudden, that is a team that made the Western Conference Finals last year, went to 6 games. Okay, maybe now they're a true contender's value there. And then the other team, which I think is so undervalued right now in the futures market, is the New Orleans Pelicans. This is a team that, when healthy, has been very good. They've dropped off significantly in terms of the standings. They were up right around first place, second place for a few weeks. Zion gets hurt. BI now is back in the lineup. But their team specifically, I think, has the most complete roster along with Boston Celtics when it comes to the playoffs. They can play a bunch of different ways. They're at plus 2,500 right now. Obviously, Zion's health is a big concern, but that to me is another value play.
Yeah, I'm really interested. Those are great calls there, JJ. To me in particular, I would look a little bit here at the Mavs. That number you threw out, plus 3,000. Let's kind of think about, what wins in the playoffs, what wins, in the NBA championship here. It's your star players, playing fantastic and getting you in the biggest spots to cash your bets and win these big games. So you're starting off with kind of what we started in today's segment here, having a star player to lean on. So you have Doncic. Here's the other thing though, JJ, to me, when you look at futures, it's not just, if you bet plus 3,000, you're really hoping to, cash a big bet there if the Mavs win it all. but also a hedging opportunity. I think a lot of people overlook this. When they bet a future, they're just like, oh, they need them to win the championship. But to your example, what if you make a move here? And again, the trade deadline's coming up. So stay glued to Twitter. What's Woj saying? What are all these insiders saying? If you can get a kind of a leg up on a future where, maybe there's a rumor that Doncic is going to get, a big sidekick here, and you can get on that 3,000 before it falls to plus 2,000. That's another way to kind of look, pre and post trade deadline. But to your point here, I think when you're looking at the Mavs in particular, if you can get help for Doncic, that's huge. But just from a hedging standpoint, you don't need the Mavs to win it all. What if they just get to the Western Conference Finals and you have an opportunity of, let's say, I don't know, maybe it's Denver and the Mavs here in the conference championship game. You could then bet Denver and go the other way and hedge your bet, or you could let it ride. So to me, just when you get to the playoffs, this, JJ, your 8th, your 9th guy, they're not as important as the regular season when depth really matters. When you're going into the playoffs, your top players are playing pretty much the entire game. So that's why, to me, your star players are so important. But again, the Mavs would intrigue me because you wouldn't really need them to win it all. You just need them to get pretty deep and then create a hedging opportunity. So again, the Mavs plus 3,000, to me, that feels a little bit low. I could really, think about placing a futures bet on the Mavs.
And to reemphasize something you said, and you bring up a great point, a big part of winning in the playoffs is, do you have the best player in the series? That often determines which team advances. You mentioned the trade deadline as well. We'll be covering that in the next episode of Islands in the League. Josh, we really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, JJ. It was great talking to you.
Thank you for watching episode 1 of Islands in the League. We hope it was informative. We hope you learned something. We hope you laughed. Maybe you cried.
Sorry.
Who knows? We'll be back next month with episode 2.